You talked a little bit previously about John Cejka, and you'd mentioned that you'd had the opportunity to look at some of the files that he had, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about that?
Certainly. Early in 1983 and 1984, I had the opportunity, actually, no one, I got to tell you this right at the beginning, that nobody really knows where John Cejka came from, because he just showed up one day, and it seemed like John Cejka and I were friends immediately. And as I got to know John Cejka just a little bit more, he used to come around and he always carried this pair of horseshoes with him, and he was always playing with these horseshoes and always trying to get me to unlock the horseshoes, but of course I wasn't coordinated enough to use those horseshoes. But he was a strange character, and like when we were talking in the restaurant earlier tonight about this, Rhonda, my wife, didn't care for just two people in my life, and one of those two people were. One was John Cejka and the other was Ron Cole. And why, I have no idea. She just didn't like these two individuals, so she was around during certain things, but not all the time. But one night I was called on the telephone by John Cejka, and I was told to go to a certain address in Canoga Park. And so I just got in the car and went there. And I'm going to tell you all something. I walked into what looked like a normal building, but when I got inside this building, I'd never seen anything like that inside, because all along the top of the building on the upper rows it seemed like invention after invention after invention after invention. And it went on and on and on for about 1,000 feet. And what was on that shelf were things like magnets that picked up gold coins, gasoline that was made from plants, which he called green gasoline, a real working model of a PAP engine, coils that I've never seen that were conical shaped, almost like a Tesla coil, but much steeper angles than that, which were all resonant at a certain frequency. And I paid very close attention to one thing when I walked in there, and I said, "John, what's that over there on the wall?" And he said, "Oh." And I walked over to the wall, and now I'm telling you, for 1,000 feet, there was this chart, and it was basically laid out like this here. And on the chart, he said that, and it had all these little lines like this on the chart. But it was huge. It was almost 1,000 feet long. Because it was quite a big building. They were producing water gasoline, where I didn't really understand what they were doing, because I wasn't in the gas business, but I can tell you that they had a water fuel where you could actually take a garden hose, and once they dumped the catalyst in the tank, you could just put the garden hose in there and fire up the truck, and it was gone. Full tank of gasoline. And
was this the ANGAS one, or the?
It was called Anafuel.
Anafuel.
So was it actually gasoline, or was it?
Yeah,
just
it was actually gasoline. It smelled like gasoline and had the same color as gasoline. And this plant was producing a lot of fuel.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one where they used the styrofoam?
Yes. It was a styrofoam gasoline. Of course, I never knew what the chemical composition of this was, but But I can tell you this, when he gave the demonstrations, he would take just a little bit of the liquid, which was in a little bottle, and he would put some nap, what they call nap. He'd put a little bit of nap, and he'd add the catalyst to the nap, and then the rest was water. So if the jar was this, say this high, just the mixture that they put in it was about this high, and then the rest was water, and it was gasoline. He would take that, and they had a Briggs & Stratton engine there with an empty tank, and he would dump that in the tank, and he'd turn the choke on, give the thing a pull, and it'd fire right up. And when I asked, you know, how can you run that engine in here, he says, because this gasoline takes the CO2 out of the air and pulls it down, and it falls down to the ground. So whatever the engine was doing, it was coming out clean burning. There was no oil, there was no smoke, there was no smell. So anyway, I want to backtrack a little bit here. I started asking John, what is this chart? And he said, well, go over there and look. And so I went over there, and it showed where time started on our time scale. And then it went on and on and on, and it got up into somewhere in here, and 2001 was about here, or 2000. And there were little pictures underneath the chart. And I know that most people are going to find this hard to believe, but all along this chart it said who the presidents were, whether they were assassinated or not assassinated, what the year was going to bring as far as food for the world. And, you know, when it got up into, because I was in 84, I was back here somewhere. And when I got up here, it said that the world was in a chaotic condition, basically, at 2000. And it showed war and war and war and war and more war. It also showed that it named the presidents by name. It showed Reagan, it showed Carter, it showed Reagan, it showed George Bush Sr., and after that it showed Clinton. It said the Clinton years right in here somewhere. And now how they knew I was back here, how they knew even who the presidents were was a mystery to me. And when I asked John Cejka that question, he says, we know. We know who's going to be the president. And right around in here, he said, it showed a little picture, and it showed two little towers. And it showed them on fire. And I never put two and two together, because I was never allowed, while I was at the Cejka lab, to take a photograph of this. But it showed war. It showed war from here on all the way to the end. And it said that time, it ended here for us. And if you take this scale, if this is 1984, and you just look at this from here to here, this must be 2036 or 2034 or something. But it said it ended there, and it ended in disaster. There's nothing went on past that. And I never really paid attention to after this, but I thought it kind of funny when it said, you know, here's Reagan, and then Bush was going to be the next president. And I said, how do you know that? I kept saying that to him, and he says, we know who all the presidents are going to be from here on up. And at that point in time, he says, well, just take all the time you want and look at the chart. He said, but that's all I'm going to answer. And that's all he did answer. He wouldn't go any further than that. But he said that they knew what the future held all the way to a certain date. And so it was easy to make the chart. They could go forward, they could go backwards. And as I got to know John Cejka a little bit more, John Cejka started to open up, and then one day he came over with a notebook, which you see many notebooks around the table here. And he said, come here, I want to show you something. And I started to look through the notebooks like this. And I said, well, I've never seen anything like this. You know, it talked about ESP machines, it talked about aluminum car air batteries, it talked about things that should have happened. And I said, well, gee, can I copy that and study it? And he says, you got 1 hour. He says, do you have a copy machine that's capable of copying what I have? And I said, no. And he said to me, he says, well, let me tell you what to do, John. He says, you got that little machine out there right now, so you can copy a couple pages out of this book. It's great, copying the pages. And then I studied them at night, and they were talking about things that were done in the 1800s in this one, articles and things like that, and time, and decomposing rocks for transmutation and things like this. Most of this stuff was, he says, well, let me tell you how to do it. He says, they're running a special on copy machines right now. Just call up and get one, and the salesman will bring you out, and he'll let you keep it for a night. He says, and I mean, as funny as that may seem to everybody, you know, we're talking about a guy here that could throw a card out to a highway patrol officer and tell him, get the hell out of here. And the guy wouldn't even give him a second look. He'd just get out of there as quickly as he could get out of there. And he said, just get that copy machine and I'll be over here with about 5 or 6 books. Well, when he got over there, when he got over to the shop, the books were like this thick, each book. I said, how the heck am I going to cut? I said, you got over like 250,000 copies here. He says, don't worry about it, John, just start copying. So I got all day. And so I started taking things out of his book and running them through the machine. And what was funny, it was a newer IBM machine that they were trying to sell to small businesses. And I got through about 2 of these books and the machine quit. And he says, I says, oh gee, I gotta pay for this machine now. He goes, don't worry about that, John, just call him up and tell him that it quit. And then you couldn't evaluate it. Right? I mean, you know, I got 100,000 copies on a machine, you know, or 200,000 copies and the machine breaks. Of course the machine breaks, right? So this was one of the funnier moments with Cejka. And he said, just call the guy in the morning and tell him to bring over another machine because this one broke down. And so I called the guy up and he says, what do you mean it broke down? We haven't had any problem with these machines. I said, well, this one quit while I was copying. You know, I myself never had a copy machine. I had one of those little, what you would call the dry transfer paper where they came out on the rolls, right? And it looked like chicken scratch when it came out. And I called this IBM guy up and he came right out and he says, he goes, you didn't tell me that you're going to run 100,000 copies or 200,000 copies through this darn machine. You know, and I said, well, the machine shouldn't fail. Right? It's only, you know, 10 or 15 reams of paper that I put through the machine. So he says, so Cejka showed up, and he said to the IBM guy, he says, well, just bring another machine. What do you care? He said, you're sampling the machine, you know, a company can't buy a machine that doesn't work or breaks after so many copies. And so the guy left. The guy went and got another machine. He came back and he left another machine. And of course, that machine quit too. And I copied what I could here. And these are the Cejka files that he had in Chatsworth, California. These are all files from John Cejka. And you just don't start copying, and start getting books this thick, that without breaking the machine. So I started copying all I could copy, and I started studying these books at night, and I've come to realize that our physical science, as we know it in electronics and electricity and everything, is just totally backwards. And that other projects were going on, and that they had all this information, so it kind of makes somebody wonder, who was this guy,
Talking with Johnny about his relationship, he told me that there wasn't anybody that reminded him more of himself than John. And I think he really relished the time that they were together. And I think it was a case where he was very excited that he had met somebody that understood what he was talking about. And of course, John was talking at that time about free energy, and of course, my brother was really interested in that. And of course, he saw the first prototypes that Mr. Bedini was making, and he was very impressed.
But in true reality, John Cejka was John Cejka, and he could demonstrate where physics was wrong in all these things. Like, and he says, John, he says, the future is going to hold electric cars, he says, but they buried that. And like as an example, Pat, if you'll read that, what's it say there?
Aluminum air battery development toward an electric car.
But like, try to zoom in just a little bit and show the battery. And see, it's an unpublished paper because it's like a company demo version. And look here, I think I drew a portion of it somewhere in one of our things, but see, it's an aluminum wedge. And that wedge goes right down in there, and you just drive into the gas station, and you change the aluminum wedge, and away you go for another 300 miles. So they already had the electric car. They already had it.
Right.
They had it back then. And they knew that it was going to be real important in the future because fuel was going to be a problem because this is like endless war, according to Cejka. So, and then the other thing that they knew about was they knew about time. And I think you can see that right over there, Pat.
This one?
That it's an unpublished, I think it says unpublished.
Possibility of experimental study of the properties of time.
Can you say that again?
Possibility of experimental study of the properties of time by N.A. Kozyrev.
Yeah, it says, what does it say right up there on the release?
Unpublished article, Pulkovo, something in Russian, September 1967.
So they already knew about time travel back then.
And that's an unpublished Russian article.
Yes,
It's
which
an
nobody
unpublished
has.
article, right.
So how would they get an unpublished
Right,
Russian?
how did, unless they were all together and they just thought that they can convert me into doing something, is working for them. Because John Cejka had the unique comprehension, and I gotta say comprehension, of knowing people that could do it. So I guess you could say that I was pretty fortunate, like in a couple of these things here,
This one?
Like this one here, he's doing transmutations, and these are actually
this
his
one?
note. Right here, actually his notes.
Ranisotorium.
Yeah. And if you flip a couple of pages, Pat, you can see it on the left-hand side. It says ruby gold.
Something to gold.
Yes, ruby to gold.
Ruby to gold.
And how to do it.
Mercury, tin, metal.
Right.
Something rubies.
Yes. Ruby to gold. How to make an electrical
Hold on.
conductive crystal ruby to gold. And we're going to cover that. You know, we're going to cover this in the DVD where we talk about making these crystals in the oven.
Okay.
But that was the original. Now, John, I got to say that John,
Whose writing is this?
that's John Cejka's writing. So wherever he got the information, it's written right there.
It says tin makes platinum.
Yeah, tin makes platinum. Now, okay,
What makes mercury? Something.
Carbon or something there.
Converts to crystal something.
Right, so, and it says all done with a red powder. You know, this was a red powder. So, being as inquisitive as I was, I had to try it all. So, I mean, I went through these books methodically, and I've tried just about everything that John Cejka said here. And it sure does work, because I was able to make sound generating crystals and things like that that were rubies is saying that they were growing mites in what year there?
1837.
Yeah. And that they knew all about that. And as you go
Oh,
through
that was
these-
biogenesis.
yeah.
Can you back up? Let me.
Yeah.
Andrew
And
Cross.
I'm
Andrew
gonna go
Cross.
to the other side for a minute.
Genus Acori.
Yeah, and I think you're going to find in here.
Tom Bearden has written about him too.
Mm-hmm.
And the same as the Urey Fox Miller experiments in San Diego proved that as well. And then Faraday actually went to the Royal Society and backed up the fact that Andrew Cross was making living entities in the lab just by sparking.
Yeah. Now, Tony, if you can get the camera over here, and Pat, if you could come to for a second. I don't have my glasses on. Could you read what's...
Okay.
This is Walter Russell,
Okay.
and this is a power generator that they want to replace all the generators with. And guess who's going to do it? Raytheon.
Okay, yeah.
And it says right there in the correspondence.
Dear Walter and Lee.
Yeah.
I should have written long before this to thank you for all the treasured gifts you have sent me and for the courtesy you extended to the delegations from NORAD and ADC.
From NORAD.
Yeah.
Now, it still comes back to the question, who was John Cejka, and how did he know, and where did he get all this
And why
stuff?
did he keep them all?
Yes, and
Yeah.
why was there only a few people that he confided in, and why did he allow me to copy it?
And he was really a prodigy, wasn't he? An electrical prodigy, wasn't
Yeah, he was from a child. He was brilliant that way. And of course, being born on a farm, especially back in the time that he was born, in the 30s, it was all work
he? Yeah.
and no play. And so he always was anxious to get away from the farm.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of things, all he could do, but fact was that, he felt like he was just misplaced. He wanted to be where the action was and talk to people that were doing things, and he had a lot of great ideas. But
What did he do from an early age that showed everyone that he was kind of had some affinity for working in the electrical field?
well, I remember him talking about this, is that everybody was wondering, you know, where does ball lightning come from? So he built his own spark gap, and he took his mother's vacuum cleaner, and he built an orifice for it. And you could do this today if you build the right spark gap on DC voltage and run the stream of air past that spark gap. You will make ball lightning. Because when the lightning is electricity is formed, he claimed it was separated from the main stream of the voltage. It would like curl up, and it became balls, little ball lightning. And that was one of the first things he did, and I think he wasn't even 10 years old. So, but, you know, he went to Ames for a while, and I know that he had extremely high IQ, but he was a young man. He was interested in a lot more things in science at that time.
Yeah.
So, being susceptible, he got into a marriage situation, and his whole life changed. So, but when he was a young man, he built a welder using glass plates and tin foil. He built a transformer and built a welder and Dad used it for years after John left the farm. But my father thought it was just foolishness, you know. But he built a welder from scratch. And I don't know, it was just a few years ago, I think they still had that welder. But yeah, he was pretty young when he did that. So, yeah, there was a lot of things that being the kind of person and the IQ he had, he was always getting into different problems because, you know, he just wouldn't let something be. He would try to find something, way to do it better. So, yeah. And I suppose from an early age, I can remember him talking about building his first Tesla coil, and he was real interested in those things. Of course, in those days, he knew more than what many high school teachers knew. So they had a hard time, you know, instructing him because he was way ahead of them. So, and I think that was one thing that was pretty frustrating for him. Because he wasn't going to let unanswered problem stay unanswered. So
now these files have been sitting in these books since 1984 on my shelf, and you can tell by the paper.
Yeah.
But these books are crammed full. Like, why am I in some of these books?
Yeah, I saw you over here in this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Where it says whose scalar tuner it was. And if you could pan over here for a minute of who did the scalar tuner.
John Bedini.
You never hear it. Only Tom Bearden had published that us two did it. But
Bedini version of the Dea Ferreto scalar detector.
mm-hmm.
So that was Cejka's file on Bedini.
Yes. And there's a few more in these books that he had on me.
That one mentions something about Bedini.
And actually, I think he even had I've added some things to these books, you know, to keep safe and things like that, but he had, you know, Baldinelli with the battery chargers, and he had just countless number of different articles here on time and space, and in fact he even had Sweet, a paper that nobody's ever seen, called right here, Pat, and it's even signed by Floyd.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right.
So how did he get this paper? Because this paper really never was available.
It's an agreement between them, what they're going to do.
What they're going to do on the space flux alternator. And it's all written up here.
That's unpublished, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that I know of. But it's all here. So, at
What, what was the ESOP Institute, do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But, I mean, to have stuff like Walter Russell, you know, who wrote all those metaphysical books, right? Where he said, you know, where he showed spirals and things like that. Like, as an example, Walter Russell drew drawings. And I kind of think when we go through the G-field generator in one of the tapes, that you're going to see that I drew basically the same thing when the G-field was running. In fact,
Yeah.
you mentioned that to me, Tony,
Yeah.
that it looked very similar. But that's actually Walter Russell's writing.
And he's got the sun as the center of it.
Yeah, he's got the sun as the
Yeah.
center, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Because without the sun, this cosmic energy doesn't come, we can't get it,
Right.
right? So, and
Walter Russell also talks about the fact that gravity is very different from what we believe it to be.
yes, you read that,
Yeah.
where, and the law of thermodynamics is completely different, and it's right in here. So, basically what I wanted to do was give you an overview of some of the new DVDs coming.
Yeah.
You know, where we're gonna prove out these things and show them to you.
Yeah.
And you have about 10 books on the table, but
We got a few more boxes to go through, Tony.
so this is just
This is just starters.
a smorgasbord.
Yeah. This is just the starters because most of this stuff I just couldn't put into binders. There's 250,000 pages, I would say.
And you read them
I
all.
burned up 3 copy machines doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been through in the time that I knew Cejka, I have probably I have proven out what I needed to prove out to myself, and that's why I moved on to the monopole motor, and that's why I moved on with Ron Cole to the window motor, because I know that energy is not what people think it is.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing to me that you got all this stuff.
Well, I was quite favored by John Cejka for a while, and then I got him mad and by defying him. And he would always call me up on the phone, or he'd come to me in person, and he'd say, "John, you're going to be sorry you did that." And I'd laugh that off and take off. And he'd hit me with something from a distance, and he'd ask me when I come back, "How'd you feel? Did you like that?" And I said, "I wasn't very good, John," you know. And he did it to me when I went down to visit Tom and Pete Kelly. And, you know, he told me exactly what he was going to do to me on the phone, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to say it on tape. Because it was the worst time that I ever had. And I'm telling you, when you got to stop every 15 minutes, you guys can figure out what he did. You know, and the funny thing about it was, when he got mad at you, he had a machine for you. You know, like one example is, he showed me how to construct a device, and he wanted to see if I could do it, and I did it. And he came over at 12 o'clock midnight one night, and he said, "Let me see." And I went ahead and I built the device. And he says, "Do you know all the things that you could do with the device?" He said, "You can change the weather. You can cause sickness. You can cause healing. You can just do whatever you want to do." You know, now he gave me a simple set of instructions. And I think that was to more or less save me. You know, to because he had one.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day I was playing with a machine and he was sitting there and I said, well, John, what if I just go get my hands wet? And as Rhonda told you tonight in the restaurant, that I went and got my hands wet and I sprinkled the water on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a storm came out of nowhere and it just was raining to where we had somebody coming. And the guy says, what the hell's going on here? He goes, it's not raining anywhere else, it's just raining here, but it's raining quarter drops.
And his windshield wipers wouldn't
Yeah, his
work.
windshield wipers wouldn't work, nothing would work. And of course my brother said, how do I stop it? The roof's going to flood. We had a flat roof,
Oh, God.
and there was a retaining wall around the roof, and the water was coming in through the air conditioning ducts. And I'll never forget it because we did some healing. We did a lot of good with the machine. We healed a lot of people with the machine under John Cejka's instructions, which he seemed to be able to get away with anything.
Mm-hmm.
And as an example, we're driving down the highways doing 95 miles an hour on the highway, and the highway patrolman comes up behind him and stops him, and he says, this guy's going to waste my time. And he took a card out of his wallet. In fact, Gary told the story today, Tony, to you. He took a card out of his wallet and he threw it at the highway patrol officer and he says, get out of here. The highway patrol officer picked up the card, looked at the card, threw it back at John Cejka. John put it back in his wallet, which he carried up here. And he says, now you've wasted my time. And just continued to go 90 miles an hour the rest of the way. And these are things you don't forget because, for example, he collected stuff on Oregon generators here.
Yeah, I saw that there.
Yeah, and where they're talking about boxes that you sit in. And see, this is all his writing. So he must have went and seen this in operation. Because I think that's what his job was. See, like this guy has, these are cobalt blue glasses that this guy is wearing.
Why?
Because then you can see the Oregon energy, he said.
Huh.
So, you know, for right now, I think that's what I want to say about John Cejka, and I think that we'll cover it. We'll cover more about John Cejka in the upcoming DVDs.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick question, John, before we take a break. How was he funded? Any idea?
I can only tell everybody this, that we went out to a restaurant and he made a phone call and I overheard the phone call and he said to the girl that was with him at the time, her name was Nancy, he said, Nancy, bring home a bag of money tonight.
And she worked.
She worked for a bank. Well, she came home with a bag of money. Threw it on the table. I was there having coffee with him and said, is that enough, John?
So you don't know whether she
I
pulled it
don't
out
know
of her
where the money
account
came.
or whether... Yeah.
I have no idea. I know that I've never seen the man work.
Nancy was a woman he lived with
Yeah.
in California. She, of course, has died.
I heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you told me. Yeah.
But she was probably about the same age as his oldest daughter. But she had, you know, the intelligence of, and I think it was, there was some chemical connection that drew them together.
Yeah.
And
She worked in a bank, is that right?
yes, she was some kind of, she was, had something to do with fund, escrows.
Escrow, yeah.
Real estate type.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just could not be in that world.
Yeah.
I didn't feel comfortable.
I just seen him go around and look at things. And when he went around and he looked at something, they were suppressed after that. And there was a file on it.
Was this the, talking of money, wasn't this the same guy that he got into an argument with a guy with a bag of Krugerrands, or?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I saw something. Is that about the...
Gold magnets, right?
Right, yeah.
Anyway,
in one of these books I saw something about
He got
that.
into an argument with a guy that was a hot shot coin collector. And he said, bring your bag of coins. And the guy said, yeah, I'll bring the bag of coins, but you're not going to be able to pick them up. And John says, can I keep every coin that I pick up? And I remember him saying this to the guy when he walked through the door. He says, take a handful of Krugerrands and just throw them out there on the ground. And I watched it. The guy took a handful and threw them out on the ground, and John said, that's not enough. And he took another, and he threw some more out on the ground. And he went around with this portable device, and he just snatched them up. Just pop up to the machine, and he put it in his pocket. It's mine, right? Pretty soon he had all the coins on the floor, and he said, would you like to try with the rest of the bag? The guy said, no, I'm just going to live up to my deal.
So about how much was a Krugerrand worth then?
About $450 an ounce, I think. Maybe $500, somewhere around there. But it didn't make any difference to John Cejka because it really wasn't the money.
Right.
I have his, I don't know if Bedini ever talked about his gold magnet.
Oh yeah, he did mention that. Yeah.
I have it,
You kidding?
and it works.
Huh.
I don't pick gold up.
Yeah.
But it's not like a traditional magnet. It works like that,
Right.
but it's got to do with resonance. It doesn't have to do with magnetism,
Right. Yeah.
and or traditional magnetism.
Right.
But I did keep that. I found that and preserved it. This is actually a specialized magnet which you were talking about, and this was built by my brother, and at one time had a wand attached to it. This is the bottom of the cabinet, but I guess it's exposed now since I was doing some work with it, and I just left it like that. The fact is it does get very hot, and the cabinet it was in was too much for it. So we had to take the cabinet off of there. But it will pick up gold. It does have the problem of getting very hot, but the other problem is that it seems to, if you're in the proximity of it for very long, you can get ill from it. And I don't know if it's doing something to the molecular structure of the blood, but that seemed what my brother thought. And I couldn't disagree with him, and I cautioned him about using it in nature where you are exposing the microbes in the environment to a maybe altering factor which could change their genetic makeup. So, 99% of all changes that happen genetically are fatal to the species.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think he dropped it using that for that point. But
There was an attachment that went with it, was there?
there was a cabinet that went over the top, and that had a attachment that went in and hooked up to the magnet. Now, I can't even tell you, there's some loops here that fit underneath here, which I think was used, that's what was powering the wand. But, because you have the reverse side of this magnet that would work as good as this side. It's going to be both sides,
So would that unit itself pick up the metal,
Mhm.
or the wand, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's simple. It's the configuration of the core. It's not a hollow core. So it's not an air coil magnet, electromagnet. It's this core, this tuned coil inside this coil is what makes it work. And of course, the power that's going to it has to be a certain voltage. And those things are the two triggers that makes this work.
What kind of voltage does it?
It's using 70 volts DC.
Okay, pulsed or direct or
direct?
Just 70 volts
Yeah,
DC.
that's what I got this transformer here for.
Right.
And just a simple transformer, and it does work. I guess I'm cautioning you about it because I don't want to expose anybody to something that's highly experimental.
Right.
But
and you worked on this with John.
Yeah, I worked on it with John, and he showed me how he put it all together,
Yeah.
and how he made it. So I was involved in that much of it. I didn't demonstrate it to the people that maybe you might know about, but I saw it work, and I in fact used it here in the house on myself. And I must admit that I was sick for a while after using it, so I just hesitate using it at this point because we got to find out more about what it's doing.
Where did you and John get the idea or the underlying principle behind this? How did that come about?
Well, John, he was always looking for enterprises, and he was actually told about the possibility that this magnet could be built by a friend of his. And this friend, and I can't use his name, he's still alive, I don't think he'd want me to use it, but this friend said that he knew that it was possible to do, and that somebody told him that should be built in such a way. And John kind of built it as a challenge because he didn't think it would work, and it did work. So I don't know why it works either, except that the magnetic principles in it are not truly magnetic. In other words, it's a resonating magnetic field. And it produces quite a vibration, quite a hum to it. I don't know, it's in its crude form here, and I think it could be refined quite a bit.
Did he just have the one model, or this is it?
This is the only model.
Yeah.
And this is just on there because, like I said, the cabinet's been removed, and it's just shielding the coil and the works underneath there. And it's nothing fancy, but like I said, it was something that he built as a challenge to what this guy said.
How long did it take to build it, to get the bugs out of it?
Well, I think that he had a problem building it, not from the standpoint of the functioning parts of it. It was the voltage. And the voltage on this is key to making this work. And I can't seem, I've tried it on all kinds of metals, and it doesn't seem to work on anything but gold.
So by extrapolation, maybe if you change certain parameters, it would pick up other metals or plastic or...
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe that. But there would have to be some changes made in the
Right.
core, the core here, which he told me what he thought would have to be done.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it. I just felt that maybe it was a little touchy to do any more work on it, so I've just left it like it has been.
Yeah.
And I've done a little tinkering down here with it, but I just didn't want to go any further.
Yeah. You say making changes in the core, just generic terms. What kind of changes would make it move one way or another in terms of up or down the periodic table? Or
Well, I don't know how much to go into it, but this core is not a solid core.
right.
So it's segmented. And these segments that are in here are of the kind of metal that he found out would work. And secondly, of the right shape. And that's what the key is. So you'd have to take it apart and and using the same psychology of way he built it, put different corresponding segments in there with different lengths and different metals, different kind of metals. It's not gold that's in here, by the way.
Right. Is it a metal or an alloy?
It's a metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it would just primarily be a matter of playing around with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was this built when he was in California, or when you were both in California, or what?
This was built in California.
Yeah.
This was built in California, and it wasn't when, I believe, it was just prior to the time that I went out there, and he had it at his place of residence. He had a shop that he worked on stuff, but at his residence he also had a lab, and it was there that I saw originally in the case, which he later removed because it was just too hot.
Yeah.
And of course, it could be cooled, and there's ways to cool this magnet. There's no doubt about that. So that's not difficult. We just never went to that extent. So.
And basically, you talked him out of pursuing it because of the potential side effects.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I explained to him, what possibly could be doing to his blood, and then the possibility that, say, if you were, say, to like the aspect, me and I talked about gold being present in ocean water. Now, it's dissolved and it's a molecular state, but you might be able to pull gold out of ocean water. But there's the other factor of what are you doing to the microbes in the water? We got to find out more about it.
Yeah.
But it's a tremendous source of gold. It's just plain ocean water.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's one of the aspects we talked about. He was pretty interested. He had somebody interested in putting money into it.
Yeah.
But he decided later he just didn't want to pursue it.
Yeah.
So,
But he was interested in gold anyway, wasn't he?
yeah, it was. And of course, gold was $60 an ounce.
Yeah.
Now it's $1,000. So it might be a factor to consider. Through the right kind of research, maybe you could do it.
Yeah.
As, the shielding that it might take to do might be kind of expensive, but $1,000 an ounce, you could probably pay for that pretty quick. So,
What exactly did the wand look like? Was it metal or plastic or?
I can't tell you, except that I knew there was a jack in the cabinet that attached to.
Right.
And I can't tell you, I don't know. I never did see that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When he got rid of the cabinet, I never saw the one.
Yeah.
So,
and John Cejka always had these famous sayings. Little things like, you'd see that two countries would be fighting between each other. This country would be Christian, and this country would be Catholic. And he would say to me, he says, look, John, they drag their crosses into war, and they're fighting with the same God. He would say things like that. And I kind of would look at him because I was brought up religious, and I would say, well, wait a minute, the guy, he's not really insulting anybody. He's just saying, onward Christian soldier with a cross.
Right.
Right? And what are they fighting for? They're fighting this. It's the same God.
My
It's
God's
different.
better than your
My
God.
God's better than your God. And it just blew me away about the things that he knew. He knew what was going to happen in the future before it happened. He would say, you'd be driving along and he'd say, see the way those trees are shaped, John? He'd say, the energy's at the top. if you had a machine, you could catch it at the top. And pretty soon, after he gave you the geometric shape, you could see all through nature, right, that there was this geometric shape. And the thing was growing beautifully. You know, so he knew. And he said to me, he says, you see that gold mine over there? We lived in California, so Placerita Canyon wasn't far away. And once in a while we'd drive up Placerita Canyon and he'd say, see that? He said, you know, they buried all this gold underneath the freeway. There was a vein of it. They just buried it. I said, well, how do you know that, John? He says, because I know. And so he'd said, there's little bugs that make this gold, John. He says, and you come back in 30 years and you'll strike gold again. So, and then come to find out in all his stuff, I think you and I seen where it said these little bugs make gold.
Right.
Yeah. And so he checked everything out.
Bedini was telling about the green gasoline that John, your brother, had.
Yeah, I had some of it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had some of it, and it smelled like coal.
Huh.
And there's supposedly in Virginia or where the coal mines are.
Yeah.
There was somebody that, and I can't remember. I'd have to go back to my stuff. But
Yeah.
there was a little German that got that green stuff from a Martian,
Right.
and it was made by coal, and
Yeah.
from coal. And John got, I don't know how he found out about this guy, but he went to see him, and he found out the guy had a process to take coal and refine it into a liquid.
Right.
And I saw pictures of it and formulas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they never became my possession.
Yeah.
But, and John, he tried like a lot, very hard to get hold of those formulas. And I don't know that he ever did.
He was the only man that I ever knew that had one of everything. And he had a gigantic schoolhouse with file cabinets in it, where all this stuff had been kept for years and years and years, suppression. And I think when Tony was reading some things here, that he recognized some names and he knew they were spies and they were suppressors. Like, for example, in one of these things, Moray's mentioned, where Moray actually filled in the missing chemicals. Now, how did he get that?
Well, Cejka filled in the missing chemicals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where did he get the information?
Yeah.
And he said, don't worry about that, John. When I asked about that, he says, we've made that a long time ago.
And that's in one of these files that I was looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of these. There's so many of them now.
Yeah, there's just tons of these. You know, different papers with Cejka's writing on it where he obviously went and checked it out, and if it was something that was really, truly workable and real, then it was suppressed. But this, we know that Walter Russell was for real because his books are out there.
Yeah.
And we know that that
So
John...
how did he get hold of these letters from Walter Russell
Well,
to
that's...
Henry?
well, he
Musberg,
told me the story on this. He told me that he went to visit Walter Russell's wife.
Oh, she must have given him to him.
Right?
It's very nice of her.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, we're talking, you know, she was a beautiful girl. And,
Saying he was a sweet talker?
well, he must have been a pretty darn good sweet talker because he ended up with that file and nobody else has got that file.
Right.
I wasn't there for that meeting, but he did tell me he had met with her, and I know she shared some things with him and some of Russell's journals of what he did, but I don't have them.
Nobody's ever seen that. But, I mean, you can read it here, I think Tony was reading it here. If you just read a little bit of it, Pat, where it talks about, they say right in here, nature, you know, science is wrong. I think you were reading that, weren't you, earlier, Tony?
Here's the third law, the first law.
Yeah.
New thermodynamics. First law, cold generates energy, heat radiates. Oh, cold generates energy, heat radiates energy. Cold multiplies, it cannot divide. It cannot divide. Heat divides, it cannot multiply. Second law, every reaction must be preceded by its equal action. Heat is the reaction of cold. Heat could not come into existence save for the compressive action of cold. The law of entropy, therefore, has no place in nature.
Right, exactly. So they knew all this.
Yeah.
They knew all this. So they knew about time travel. They knew about how to generate powders for transmutation. They knew the missing chemicals to the moire tube. They knew about me. They knew about Reich's work. These were people that must have gathered up information for years and years and years.
Really?
And so I think at some point in time, I think it would be fair to everybody if we'd make certain things available.
John talked to me about things that happened in John Bedini's life
Right.
that parallel some of the things that he went through. And
Yeah.
my brother John was aggressive and very inquisitive. I don't know exactly. I've never really met anybody like him. But Bedini would be as close. Between the 9 kids in the family, Johnny and I were the closest. And we shared a lot of things. But he was 18 years older, and so he was down the road quite a bit from where I was. So. But John had a series of strokes, and he finally became pretty disabled. And it was one thing he valued very much was his mind, and he was very worried about not being able to be the person he was. I took his ashes up the top of the hill, and there was no wind. The minute I dumped the ashes up, they come right up in my face, so I figured maybe he didn't want to be there, but he was going to be there regardless.
Yeah.
Corn, as you know, is a vegetable that was imported from the Caribbean up here. It was originally discovered in Haiti, I think. But corn, being a tropical plant like that, we have to plant seed in the spring, and of course, they grow amazingly fast. And by July, August, it's 6 or 7 feet tall, or maybe 8 feet tall. But it grows so fast, and the cells of the corn expand and multiply at such a great rate, and it pushes up from the center. It's like as a swirl, and it pushes up through there as it slips through the sections that are already completed. The new section will make a squeaking sound, and you can actually hear that in the field. Each plant is growing at a different rate, at a different stage, you know. So you could almost maybe put a tune together, but it'll be a solid amount of squeaking going on all the time, like a swing might make a squeaking sound like that.